how do you make some banker friends? Because everybody knows that if you want a police officer to be your friend, you need to have some donuts on you. What do you need to have on you to make some banker friends?
Money. No, I'm just kidding. Just thinking it's donuts. But I think a really easy place to start is
All right, welcome back to the pod. My name is Joe. I'm here with Kara. Kara is the owner and managing principal at Exit Equity. Kara represents business owners both on the sell and the buy side of company acquisitions. She's helped buy and sell hundreds of businesses and specializes in the sale of businesses with an enterprise value of 2 million to 15 million. She's a certified business intermediary and an elected board member for the largest professional community of business intermediaries, the IBBA. And on today's podcast, we're going to talk about the process of buying a business, something that, as you and I talked about earlier, has a lot of misnomers and myths. And today, hopefully, we're going to debunk those and kind of go through the best practices A through Z, and kind of give a high level of how these things get bought and sold. But mainly, we're going to be talking about the buy side today, right?
that's right.
Okay, cool. So you have a process that you call find, evaluate, finance, and negotiate. This is kind of your go-to when it comes to looking at businesses that the people that you represent want to buy. But I think the first question that a lot of people have is like, should I even buy a business? So I wanted to ask you, uh, what kind of people are buying businesses, and what kind of life situations or financial situations do they find themselves in? Uh, that kind of dictates that decision.
Sure. I thought you were going to start with should I buy? And I was ready to say yes. Yes, you should buy.
I should buy.
Yeah.
Well, what about everyone else?
And what about everyone else? There are, of course, all different kinds and flavors of business owners. And when I talk about them with my clients, I talk about kind of a couple different buckets. So, one, and probably the most relatable to people here, are my high net worth individual bucket. And those are individuals that are looking to buy a business either for, to buy themselves a job or a salary or extra potential income. The second bucket is financial buyers. So those are people that are looking for a business to buy to generate a financial return for themselves or their investors. So on the big end of that, you can think of private equity groups. And then the third bucket is strategic. So a business owner or a business that is thinking of growing through acquisition. And so, you can kind of blend and be a couple, one or two of those different buckets. And I think that also kind of relates to your interests and what you'd be good at running and doing as a business owner.
Sweet. So, what are the top businesses and niches that you sell and represent that you see that are sort of, you can call them trending, but we could just say the ones that you see the most?
Okay, well, there's me and then there's the world, right? So, my firm, we're here in Seattle, Washington, and we mainly work with businesses here in the Pacific Northwest or businesses that are mostly run remotely. Um, and again, we work a lot with businesses with $1 million revenue and up. But I think the fun of it is seeing what businesses are hot right now. So I think no surprise, what's been really hot in the market since COVID are business services businesses. Everybody's been working from home a heck of a lot more. And so there's been a big interest in anything that has to do with plumbing. HVAC is so hot right now. And all of those different types of, you know, anything related to the home.
There's a lot of rumors swelling, and you can kind of confirm or deny this, but private equity right now is gobbling up a ton of these kinds of businesses as well. And that is one of the types of buyers, right? But and they're also doing the same in real estate. How are people faring when it comes to competing with these kinds of buyers when it comes to some of these hot businesses?
Yeah, I think, it when you start getting into businesses that are making $1-2 million in net income, or near and dear to my heart, EBITDA, adjusted EBITDA a year, then you start running up against private equity groups, groups that they buy businesses for a living, right? They have a lot of capital behind them. That can start to get pretty darn competitive. But it's not out of the question. Again, I think when business sellers are starting to think about selling, of course, the first thing they think about is, well, how much money am I going to get? But when we really start working together and getting down the line, they also start thinking, well, what are my employees going to do? Are they going to like this new person? What is the game plan and the future for my business? What's that legacy look like? And so oftentimes kind of individual buyers, or buyers that aren't connected with a private equity firm, can provide a little bit more magic on that end that really kind of sways a business seller to kind of work with them.
Do you feel like a lot of times when you're representing, I don't want to say the little guy, but like an individual, that the seller is more inclined to sell to that person versus selling kind of to the man, like a big company that has a lot of bureaucracy and things like that?
Ooh, yeah, I feel like this answer is going to come up a lot this call. It depends, the age-old business answer. But
Yeah.
it really depends because, again, some of those bigger guys, they know this, right? So they have some really good, they can offer health insurance, they can offer a legacy. So again, I think it depends, but I think people should just consider that it's not out of the question. And also, that's where I think kind of smaller businesses can be maybe more appealing for your first acquisition play, because you have a little bit more breathing room. The people more looking at, maybe when I say smaller, maybe under $700,000 in net income, then it starts to be more high net worth individuals looking. And if it is someone with more equity, they're looking at it as a bolt on. And so it's something that they're going to add to a bigger piece. And so that can sometimes be less interesting for a business seller, knowing that they're going to get kind of absorbed into something bigger.
Who's typically faster? Who has more speed? The PE people, or
Yeah.
they're the
The
faster
PE
ones?
people, they're the faster ones. Well, because again, they have we're going to talk about like what you need, and they have their templates ready so they can throw that out there. But
Okay.
but we're all talking if like we're all starting at the same starting line, right? But what if you, Joe, approach a business owner and you're talking to him first? Then maybe there's no race.
Mm. And we'll
So
get into some of these off
we'll get
market
into some of that. Yeah.
opportunities. Okay, cool. So, what are all the ways that somebody can buy a business? Obviously, there's financing, there's cash if you can. Can you kind of break down for anybody who's listening what an individual's options are?
Yes. And this is, if we can convert just one person from us talking about this next piece, I will be like so excited. This will make my week. But, you know, there's, um, there's paying cash, all cash up front. That's very rare. That doesn't happen that often. And so if there's a business seller listening, if you get all cash offer, take it and run. Um, there is what's called SBA loan financing, which is the Small Business Administration provides a program. So it's through our government that they guarantee uh, payback to local banks. So it makes all different types of banks. If you hear banks, work and provide SBA loans, they are incentivized to provide small loans under $5 million dollars, with the 7A loan is what I'm talking about, to business owners and potential business buyers. There's the good old commercial loan that probably most people are familiar with. That's more typically like a 20% down, where an SBA loan is more of a 10%, 5 to 10 to 20% down. And then there's seller financing, which I feel like is a big buzzy concept in kind of the small market business buying world, which, if you haven't heard of that before, is really a business owner that owns the business is saying, hey, I'm going to hold a piece of paper that says you owe me the money, and they're going to pay you over time with interest and pay the business owner back.
What do you recommend for people, like let's say first timers?
It depends on the business, because not all businesses will qualify for an SBA loan. But again, for a first time business buyer, I would say like a kind of a good safety guard for you is to be working with a banker. And if it can get bank finance, that means that it's a good established business, it has good strong cash flow, it's going to be able to pay you a good working salary. So there's some things that are built into that. SBA, I think notoriously the painful part of it is the application process. And kind of what they ask to collateralize from you. That can matter less if you're kind of newer in your career, you don't have your primary house, your vacation house, and your house in Hawaii. So it can maybe matter less if you have, because that's the whole idea. It's helping small business owners. Commercial loans, you have to put a little bit more down, but it's a little bit more flexible on terms. And again, seller financing is wonderful, but a lot of times business sellers are not interested in it.
You mentioned earlier that only certain types of businesses qualify for SBA loans. Can you
Mhm.
kind of ballpark or just in one scoop try to name as many as you can think of what businesses qualify typically for SBA loans?
Oh, sure. So, I mean, and there's again, so think about the SBA is the government backing banks. So then every bank can kind of call the shots on what they will or will not loan to. So this is where it's important to start making friends with some bankers and getting to know what the bankers you're going to work with, what they're interested in. But it really comes down to more, bankers are looking at the lending ratios, and the so they're kind of looking at each deal of, well, what assets are in the business? Are there a lot of assets we can lean, or is this like really based on a lot of goodwill? So that's a harder thing for them to finance. Has it been around for 20 years and it's been profitable every single year? Or did this start 2 years ago and only had one profitable year? That can be a lot trickier to finance through the SBA, right? They're bankers and they're conservative. So they're going to want to make sure that they're investing in something that they'll get their money back from. Does that help kind of thinking through that?
Yeah, it does.
Okay.
One of the big misconceptions I think a lot of people have is that you need a ton of money to buy a business. And you are, I can see you're eagerly awaiting to debunk that. But kind of walk through some of the misconceptions about money when it comes to buying businesses. I'm sure there's tons of people out there that have thought about the idea, but they have this limiting belief where they think like, oh, you need a ton of money or you need X amount, millions to get
Yeah.
some of these deals done. Probably at the higher level you do, but talk about some of these home service businesses that you've helped buy and sell. What is the number that people should be thinking about as far as having in their savings or the kind of loan that they're going for? Just debunk this one.
Yeah. So this is where it's worth making a friend or two that's a SBA banker or even your local bank who's banking with you right now. But I think exactly that. When I talk to people about buying a business and it's a business that's going to be big enough to again pay you a paycheck, right? So that you can either work in it or make enough out of it that it can be kind of your full-time cash flow. Um, so people go, oh, well, I don't have $3 million to buy a $3 million business. Yeah, of course not. We don't go around looking at houses and say, hey, we're in Seattle, right? So, well, I'm in Seattle. So that $1.5 million house, very few people have the luxury of plunking down 1.5 million in cash and going with it. So that's the same with businesses. That's where SBA loans especially can be really magical, because an SBA loan, if you can be as little as 5% down to more commonly 10% down. So, that's 150 to $300,000 down to buy a $3 million business. Now, again, that could still make some people cough and say, well, that's still a lot of money, but I'll just challenge of like, okay, well, let's say instead you're going to go start your own thing. You say, heck with that. I'm going to go just start my own business, just me. I'm going to establish my LLC. Okay, well, what are you going to do first, right? Think about, okay, well, how much runway am I going to need as I build my book of business? Okay, probably I'm going to need a year of, money to live off of. Okay, well, right there, you kind of are thinking about what's equivalent to a down payment for quite a nice size business. So I think it's just more doable than um, people think about it, especially if you've been working for, 5, 10 years and you've been squirreling some money away. And then the only thing I just kind of caveat is, of course, don't forget, just again, it's people can be more familiar with buying houses. Don't forget closing costs, attorney costs. There's a couple other things in there that you have to add into what you're going to put down on the business. So you need a little bit of wiggle room as you're kind of calculating what you can afford to put down as a down payment. But I think for a lot of people, like that's what's fun for me is seeing them realize like, oh, actually, I haven't thought about that before. That's a lot less than what I was thinking.
For sure. And if you look at just a conventional loan on a house, that's 20%. So if you're buying $1 million house, you're talking about 200 grand right there. Comparable business, you said, is what, 5 to 10%.
Yeah.
So 50
And
to 100.
yeah, and a house isn't paying you a paycheck.
Right. Unless you're
So
renting it out. But
unless you're
even
renting it
but
out,
even then,
yeah.
you're making only that much money on your on top of your mortgage payment.
Right. And that's the cool thing about when you're buying a business. Yes, exactly. Like, and when you're buying a business, the bank is only going to loan to you. And again, this is how you price it and it all works into it. The bank's not going to loan to you unless what you're buying and what you're buying it for in the loan can float paying the bank back principal and interest and can float your salary or whomever's salary is going to be running the business. So those two things have to be baked in. And so, they're not going to loan to you if you come out the other end with no money, because then how the heck are you going to survive? So that's the fun part.
So we're not giving financial advice here, but it sounds like it's somewhat of a safer loan because there is such stringent criteria of like you have to be able to float the loan and you have to be able to float your lifestyle. I'm sure they're very frugal when it comes to calculating how much you need for
Yes.
your lifestyle, though.
Yes,
But
but Joe and I cannot guarantee that you're gonna run the business amazingly once you take it over. That's, we can't guarantee that,
hopefully,
but
luckily,
you will.
you're not in charge of that. You only have to help people get these things. So how much do these you said the most popular businesses that are getting acquired right now are these home services businesses, right? So
hmm
plumbing, things like that. What are they typically selling for, and how much capital do you need? Uh, so if somebody's aspirationally thinking about buying a business, they're saying that in the next 1 or 2 years, I want to buy one of these things. How much money, considering 5 to 10% down, do you really need to pick one of these things up?
Well, this is a little bit of an equation, and again, I kind of say to do it like for yourself. This is something like a banker can help you with or a broker. But what you're going to want to think about is like, okay, how much money do I have to put down? How much do I need to be making at least to start a year? And you can kind of back into that, right? Like, okay, that $3 million business, I'm going to have the 300,000 to put in my 10% down. And then but then it also, the bigger importance and where people price businesses off of is the cash flow of the business, right? Because we don't, it you can only afford to pay $3 million for a business that's going to provide cash flow for you to pay that principal and interest payment and pay yourself. So that's kind of how I say you can like back into what um, what the price of a business is. And the reason why when people talk about multiples, like let's say there's two businesses that are both generating, $500,000 of cash flow, but one business is an HVAC business where 90% of their business is repeat revenue. They don't have to do anything for it. They just know that every 6 months they go in service and their team's just on it, and that they know that looking into the future, they're guaranteed that that's going to happen, versus another home services business that's, cleaning out vent dryers, but they're only doing it and they're not really organized about how they're going after it. And so they're just constantly trying to find new clients to go service. And so then they have a sales team that's calling, and then they're losing them on the bottom end. And if you ask them, well, are you going to be making this amount next year? And they say, I don't know. We're just kind of living day by day. Wouldn't you pay more for the one that you knew you could count on that cash flow? So people are going to pay a higher multiple to pay for that business, because they can lean their that cash flow is more guaranteed than that business that, oh man, I have to go do a lot of work myself and put in a lot of processes, and maybe I can get it to that place where it's more recurring revenue, but that multiple is going to be less. So I just say that because there's a lot of things that go into kind of when you say like, well, what's the price and how do I kind of back into that? There's a lot of moving parts.
But generally speaking, if you were to throw out a number, like don't even consider it unless you have what, 100,000 in the bank. And that's not savings. That's just money set aside to buy.
I think that you should have some amount down, and I have never in my career with the businesses we're working with have never had a business sell that the buyer was not putting down a down payment. I'll put it that way. So I think, again, it depends on how big of a business you're buying, but if you're thinking that it's all going to be seller finance and you're not going to have to put any money down, that's a
Very rare
very rare case, and you're probably buying a business that has a lot of work to do. You're buying a fixer-upper.
in
So,
that case. And you better
yes,
be
in
an
that case.
amazing operator to know that you have some kind of gem there.
Right. So I know I'm kind of skirting around it because it's very different for every person, but I think, you have to kind of think about all of those things. How much money do I want to be making? And so what does that look like for a down payment? But so you need a down payment, but it's probably not as much as many people think.
Okay. So we'll
Yeah.
keep that number 5 to 10%
Yeah.
in our heads. Okay,
Yeah.
cool. So I mentioned it earlier. You have this strategy of this process of find, evaluate, finance, negotiate. Say you've qualified yourself, maybe you've made some banker friends. Which actually, let's backtrack. How do you make some banker friends? Because everybody knows that if you want a police officer to be your friend, you need to have some donuts on you. What do you need to have on you to make some banker friends?
Money. No, I'm just kidding. Just thinking as donuts. But I think a really easy place to start is where you're already banking, right?
Hmm.
Because they're going to want to keep your business and you already have an established track record with that bank. So call that bank and say, hey, do you guys work with SBA loans? Do you have, and if they do, they'll say, yep. And if not, they will at the minimum have a commercial loan division. So I would talk with them at the bank that you're already at. And, gosh, like from my office, there's like 3 banks within a block. So, I think it's great to start local and look in your local community for community banks and just have a couple conversations with the SBA, you know, bankers there. Their job is business development, and they are warm, welcoming, awesome people because their job is helping, entrepreneurs and business owners. So,
What do these conversations typically look like? So, say this is the first bank I'm walking into. I like Chase Bank. So, I
okay.
walk into my Chase Bank, I go to my local branch, and I walk in and I say, hey, I'm thinking about buying a business. Who should I talk to? I heard from Kara on the podcast that I need to speak to somebody who potentially does, I think it was commercial or SBA loans. Do you guys do those? Anybody? Or anyway, I don't know who to talk to, but can you point me to somebody? They
And
say,
they
hey,
will,
go
yes.
talk to Steve. Okay, so you sit down with Steve. What does that conversation look like?
I'd say, Steve, I am, as you just kind of teed up, I'm starting to consider buying a business, and this is my first time. You're my first conversation, but I really wanted your help modeling out what type of down payment I need to buy a business that's going to allow me to make $200,000 a year or whatever that is. Can you kind of help walk me through the process of going for an SBA loan, what the requirements are, and just kind of show me how you build out the models for making loans? And they'll go, heck yeah, and start from right there.
Okay. And what do you need to have prepared for that meeting to look at the least stupid possible?
You're first of all, you're not going to look stupid. Like they're there to help you, right? So
Right.
that's out of the question. I think just having some thought and knowledge of where you are today with what that down payment amount looks like, or kind of what your plan is to get there. You're going to have to do a business plan if you do go forward with a loan, that type of thing. So if you haven't or aren't familiar with that, I would take a look. But I'm kind of making some assumptions. If you're looking to buy a business, you're probably interested in businesses in some way, but you're going to have to do a business plan. So think through that. And I would have an idea of what types of businesses interest you. So I would have probably done some homework on just looking at some businesses for sale. So if they go, well, what kind are you looking for? You're not like, I don't know, but you can kind of say, well, this is my background. This is what interests me, but now I need to kind of understand what size is workable for me and what I can do. And they can definitely help you with that.
The reason I asked this question is because you want to take these conversations as far as you possibly can, right? So you want to have
Mm,
as much info on you as so that you can maximize your time with these people. But it sounds like you have to have a few niches or a few actual businesses in mind. You show up, maybe you have a business plan, maybe you don't, and then you can kind of walk through the numbers and work backwards to a potentially a down payment, right?
hmm Yes, and I should clarify, you don't need a business plan because you're going to want to flight it off of whatever business you're looking at. So
You'll have
I
had
don't,
to decide on one at that point.
but I think it's helpful just to be familiar with it, right? Like what am I good at? What am I getting into? If you're someone that you're great at sales and marketing, so then you'll want a business that's something that you can add to the business. So yeah, I think just kind of as we'll get into and kind of talking about finding that right business is you should work on your journey a little bit on what you're looking for, because if you can't articulate that, then they're like, well, do you want a construction business or a coffee shop? Like it's really different. So you need to kind of have some parameters so that you're getting, just as you say, so you can take the conversation as far as possible. So the more specific you can be, the more specific they can kind of help you model out what things are going to look like.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
So we'll go back to your uh your tried and true model. Uh Say that you have decided you want to buy a business and you're now on the hunt. How do you know what to look for? What niches, what types of industries, lifestyle? We're going to talk about AI proof businesses, things like that. But how do you solve the F, the find in your equation?
So I think, again, kind of as we were just alluding to, there's a lot of soul searching for yourself to be done. I can tell when I have a buyer and a seller meet, I can tell it's the right buyer when they are interested in how the business runs. And whether that means like this business builds a widget and they're like, how do you do that? How do you spec that? Like they're really into it versus a buyer that comes in and is like, how much vacation do you take and how many hours do you work a week? I can just tell like this business is not for them. So I say that because think about if you're going to buy a business, like you're going to be eating, sleeping, breathing it. So even if you're kind of managing it from the top, it's something that you should have some affinity towards the industry. It should have some affinity towards your skills, and what you've been doing in your career. I think that those are the things to think about. And it's fun to kind of think about what your skills are. And it doesn't have to be, a one for one, but if you're really good at sales and marketing, then you should be looking for kind of an old school business that the team is really passionate about the work they do, but isn't so good at selling themselves and building a pipeline, right? That could be a perfect business for someone. Or like I was just talking to some nurses, and a nurse staffing business is perfect, right? So that's not what they've been doing in their career, but man, can they talk the language of the employees they're going to hire. So I think thinking kind of through like all of the different ways that you could apply your past career to a future business is a really good first place to start, and just kind of open your mind a little bit to like how many ways you can apply your knowledge.
Okay, cool. So basically, look at things that are an extension of your existing experience. If you are a programmer right now, you might want to look at a coding school, right? Online coding
Exactly.
school, something like that. Okay, got it. So something that's tangential to what you already know.
Yep. And it's fun. If you're thinking about this, when you meet business owners, ask them how they got where they got. And, I would someone can prove me wrong, but almost always, right? We all have a thread through our career. What's taken us to the next job, to the next, to buying a business. There's always something that really threads you through, and I think that makes just the most passion and excitement for business buyers is to build something that or buy something that they can relate to.
What about lifestyle? I think a lot of people, they'll probably, I'm guessing, they'll look for a specific business. It might seem cool and interesting, but they don't realize that this is an 80-hour a week business. And of course, if you are good at outsourcing, you can probably figure out how to chip away at that number. But generally speaking, people get really excited about the niche or the industry, but they totally throw out the lifestyle that they want to live um, out of the window. And when they buy these businesses, they totally get stuck with something that is way more of a headache, like a crazy dog, for example, that is way too active for your lifestyle. We've seen that 1,000 times, haven't we? So, talk about different businesses and industries and how they might be a better fit for somebody's lifestyle.
Well, again, I think maybe I'll go to just as you described. Um, you got to do your due diligence before you buy a business to understand truly how much that owner is working. To be able to buy a business that is truly kind of, and I guess when you say lifestyle business, I think of, and so tell me if you're thinking differently, like of a business that's running on its own and really the owner is kind of managing it 2 to 5 hours a week. Is that kind of what you're thinking? So a lot of times those are hard to find because if you're only working 2 to 5 hours a week on your business, are you going to sell it? Probably not, unless you're getting a really great price for it. So this is kind of to me the balance of thinking through that. Like you should really kind of think through how many hours you want to work. But I also just want to level set expectations of kind of, I think I see more people taking the business that, yes, maybe the owner's working a lot and then kind of working it down and making it a business where you're working on it, not in it. Um, uh, and I guess I just kind of say that just not to sugarcoat things, right? Because I think it's easy to, like when I get calls from people saying, I'm looking for a business for $500,000 cash flow a year that is a absentee owner. I'm like, "Ugh, me too. Tell me when you find it. I will buy it, right? So
Get in line.
yeah, get in line. So they're out there, but you're going to have to pay a premium for it. And I guess as we're kind of talking about a first business buy, that's typically someone's first business usually isn't they're out there looking to pay through the nose premium for something that they're not going to run. But again, I guess maybe I tie lifestyle more to what I was talking about before. That's where I think it's important to have some affinity towards the work or the subject of the business you're buying. Just because you'll understand it, you'll enjoy it, you'll want to problem solve in it, you'll enjoy the employees that are also passionate about that. So, um, yeah,
What is a good starter business?
one that you have some knowledge in. You know, if you're, um, I think if there's like one component of a business that you're a little nervous about, like, oh gosh, the financial part, I've done this type of work before, but I haven't run the books. Okay, well, you can hire a good, smart person to help you with that, but you understand the rest. But if you're starting something where you're like, I haven't done the financials before, I've never manufactured anything in my life, I don't even like engineering, oh, that's a lot of new stuff to be picking up and learning. So that's where I kind of come back to a good starter business is something where you have a good foothold and some industry knowledge.
Okay. And as far as AI goes, I know a lot of people are freaking out about AI. It's definitely been chewing up a lot of software related businesses. Typically, home service businesses are a pretty safe buy, right?
Hmm.
Because there's no AI for plumbing or
There's,
HVAC or
that's right.
electrical. Okay.
Yep.
So as far as look like businesses that people might want to look at buying, these ones are safe bets because they are so physical that there's no tech out there that'll replace that.
Yes, and you and I are not here for financial advice, and none of every investment is a risk, right? But yeah, I mean,
I'm asking
I
the questions here.
well, I'm just stating, but I guess maybe think of it. I think of it this way: if I'm looking at a business that's been in business for 30 years, second gen, they've never had an unprofitable year of their life, they're still making money right now. Does that seem like something less of a risk of getting disrupted than a business that is, just been around for a year and a half and, you don't really know what the history is and it's in a really new emerging space that's still kind of solidifying. That's kind of where and why angel investors and VC firms exist, right? They're out there putting in money to try and be on the cutting edge. I think there's a nice cool world of some mature businesses that they've been around for a long time because people need them. So in general, yeah, it can be a safer bet.
So say that you've gone to your local bank. They do SBA loans.
Hmm.
You've sort of narrowed down a niche or an industry, and now you're like officially on the hunt. Where do you look for a business to buy?
So, and I think at this point, I'm assuming you've already been looking a little bit. I think anybody can go on and look, right? There's Biz Buy Sell, there's Deal Stream, there's, if you kind of, there's,
Flippa.
Flippa, any of those online ones. So, that's a good place to start. I think where you'll start to kind of get a lift a little bit more than just kind of passively looking at what's listed on those websites um, are notice who are the brokers and intermediaries that are advertising the listings that you really like. A lot of times brokers kind of are in like they do kind of like similar size businesses or they'll specialize in an industry. So if you start seeing a broker, and you're like, oh, I really like that business or that really speaks to me, I would reach out to that broker and say, hello, I'm a buyer and I'm looking for my a business to purchase. You can kind of give the cash flow parameters. Do you have a distribution list that you could please add me to? I would love to see when your new deals come to market. And I can't say for every broker, but they even if they don't respond to you, will just kind of put you on their email list. And now you're starting to get emails as soon as they hit the market instead of kind of going on listing servers and you kind of don't know how long those listings have been on there.
So hit up Kara.
Hit
Get
up
on her
me and people like me. Yeah,
Yes, and get
totally.
on her distribution list. Okay,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
but generally speaking, you want to contact a broker. Brokers are the people that are the intermediaries, so they have deals on they have people on both sides, people who want to sell, people who want to buy, and that's the kind of lowest hanging fruit. of who you can go to get in front of some of these deals.
Well, the lowest hanging fruit is just looking on these listing services. I think the next step up is engaging with some of these brokers. And then kind of the next step up from that is, okay, how do I find unlisted businesses? And those are the ones like going direct to a business owner instead of finding businesses that are already for sale. It's going and trying to find a business owner where the timing's about right and you can talk to them directly about acquiring their business.
So how do you go about contacting uh, or approaching these businesses that are currently running, but they're definitely not associated with any brokers. They're not on any list. They're not
Hmm.
on FlipUp, Biz Buy Sell. They're just not listed anywhere. Basically, it's people that might be motivated to sell, but they haven't taken the initiative of posting their business online or going to a broker with their business. It might be a thought in the back of their head, but it's your job to bring that thought out and into reality.
It's
So, how
your
do you
job
go
to
about?
sell them.
Yes, sell them on selling. So,
Sell
how
them
do you
something.
go about hitting up businesses? What's the most efficient way? What do you say? Just give me the whole lowdown.
Sure. So, I mean, and this is kind of why, right? Like, this is why business intermediaries and brokers are great because we're working with business owners all the time to do this. So I'm not saying this is an easy squeezy solution. And there are people out there that are they're called kind of searchers and they're looking for a business to buy and they this is like their full-time job. Like this they go out and they're trying to drum up businesses to purchase. So again, don't take this lightly, but they're out there, right? And maybe there's a business that you have admired that's down the street from you that you know kind of the owner's a little bit older and you see him there every day. Go talk to him and just kind of see what's going on. Um, because I think the most important thing is to do your homework before reaching out. So I don't recommend just a big old, find a list of 500 businesses and just hoping one of them is going to write you back. But, if you want to, again, whittle down to your industry, look at ones that are, within kind of the mile radius of where you're open to commuting and start looking at which of those websites look like they haven't been updated in 10, 15 years. Yeah, that might be a good one right there to kind of reach out to. Look at how many employees they have because that can give you an indication. Maybe they're way too big of a business for you, or maybe they're way too small. So, there's things you can kind of gain just by looking. So that if you do approach the business owner, again, this is kind of like approaching a little more, you got to have your stuff more together than when you're approaching a banker, that you've done your homework and you can hold your own in a conversation with them about, you know, I may be interested in purchasing your business. I've been looking for one just like yours, so I thought I'd call or and call. Don't email. Call and see. Hey, if with the right offer, would you consider selling?
That was actually my next question: email or call? Call
Call, call,
always.
call, call.
Do you have a
Always
script?
for calling. I think the I can come up with the script, but yes, like I always think maybe the big why I'm kind of stumbling here for a minute is I think the biggest thing is just be thoughtful and discreet. No one or very rarely do business owners want anyone in their business to know that they're thinking about it. So for you to call in and go, "Hey, I want to talk to the owner. I want to buy his business," is probably just not you starting off on the right foot because now you've tipped off the team and then they start worrying. So, be discreet, getting a hold of the owner. And then, kind of just as I said, hey, my name is Kara, and I have been in the market to purchase a business just like yours. And I've, really admired yours. And so I thought I'd just give you a call and see with the right offer, would you consider selling your business? And then they'll go, well, what's the right offer, right? So you have to have a little bit of knowing if they do say, well, maybe let's talk. That again, and I love that what you said earlier is like you should be prepared if they say, well, okay, that you can kind of take that conversation as far as possible. And I wouldn't suggest going right for the jugular and saying, well, great. What's your revenue and how much did you make last year? But, you know, start asking questions like, how long have they owned the business? Did they start it themselves? How many employees do they have? Just like start talking to see how much you can get about kind of the qualitative amount of business. They might not be able to do it right then on that one phone call. You might have to set up another one, but that should get you going. Because again, without knowing more about the business, you can't make a genuine offer for it.
So effectively, you want to call somebody, you want to get them on the phone. If they are interested, you want to use that conversation to obviously confirm that they're interested in selling.
Hmm.
And then you want to schedule a follow up meeting to go over specifics.
Hmm.
Okay. So you've reached out to somebody, you've they've confirmed that they're interested. You probably are going to have to reach out to a ton of people because you're basically cold calling business owners that most of them are probably happy with where they are, but there are probably a few that were thinking about selling, and those are the people you want to target or get a hold of. And somebody says, "Okay, great, let's have a follow-on meeting." Either you do it virtually if they're out of state, or if they're in person, hopefully you'll do it in person because you're going to meet eventually anyway
Hmm. What's bonus points is see if you can meet, if it's a physical location, see if you can meet there after hours so you can see the
at the place
place.
of business.
Hmm.
That's a good move. Good advice. So, say the meeting's tomorrow. What advice are you giving this hypothetical person on evaluating the business?
So one thing, again, like pro move, is it would be great to have a non-disclosure agreement that you can provide this business owner. And that says, hey, anything you share with me is going to be confidential, and I'm only using it to analyze if this is a good business offer. Otherwise, I will destroy any information I have. There's, you know, again, this is kind of where like a little bit of an investment. You may want to have an attorney of yours just kind of draft or review a quick, template, that kind of thing. But that's like a real nice touch to have that, and will allow you to have deeper conversations quicker, right? Because without a non disclosure agreement in place, a smart business owner is not going to be sharing financial information with you and proprietary information.
And
So
to be
that's kind of a
clear,
one thing of prepping that
this is
and
a
having that.
this is an NDA that is meant to protect them against you.
Correct.
So you're giving them a document that says, "Hey, anything that the business owner, have shared with you, the person that's interested in buying my business, is to be kept between us and not
Correct.
disclosed to anybody else." Okay,
And
cool.
I'm not going to take your secrets and go launch a company just like yours down the street, right? That's their biggest worry.
Okay, and that's the non-compete part
Hmm.
of this NDA. Okay, and we're not giving legal advice here, but there are plenty of boilerplate resources out there that can help you write these things up. Some of them
Right.
are AI based and have the letters G, P, and T in them, but
Right, but I'm just telling you how to look like a pro, right? Because anyone that does this a lot will be like, "Oh yeah, I have an NDA, I can send right over." So you just want to know that that's something that's really normal and a nice touch if you can be the one doing the legwork on that.
and that's probably a great way to build trust because I'm assuming that most of these business owners probably don't know about these things. They haven't had the prep call like we're doing here
Yeah.
for their end of the deal, which is the sell side. And I'm sure that that's probably the top piece of advice of like anybody that approaches you. If you start revealing any information, it's got to be protected
Yep.
via an NDA and non-compete. So if you
Yep.
kind of do that for them and say, "Hey, this is just kind of good hygiene,"
It's the
then
first thing I ask if I'm working with a business seller and they say, I've been talking to someone who's interested. I say, have you signed an NDA? First thing I ask, just to make sure that they're protected.
cool.
Yeah.
So you show up at their place of business, you give them an NDA, they're super grateful for it, or maybe they give you one because they already know what needs to be done. What kind of questions are you asking? How are you evaluating the business? And then we can kind of tip into the number one question, which is valuation.
Valuation, yes. So I always love to have a tour first and foremost. Again, depending on what kind of business it is, but just to be walked around, it gives you a really good sense of the facility, how they run the business. all of those good things. And again, I kind of go back to like, you should be really excited about whatever they're doing. And so it's just really a fun way. And I think a great way to kick off and build rapport is to have them show you around and everything that they've built. And I think it just gives you a little time to calm your nerves, right? To just kind of get settled and ask some questions. So just be genuinely curious as you get the tour. And so that hopefully by the time you go sit down together, you have a sense of like how the business kind of runs, um, and kind of what all of that looks like. Um, and then, I would just be respectful of time, keep it to, you know, an hour, and have your questions pre-prepped about, specific to this industry and business, just learning more about it and kind of how it runs. And hopefully by then they'll be willing to talk to you about financials, um, because that's, again, kind of what it's going to come down to of if this is going to work for you is, what the cash flow is, what the revenue is, what's the forecast looking like for the rest of the year and into the future.
So, funny enough, it's probably because I have a marketing background. My number one question is always, how do you acquire customers and what are your costs? Right? How
hmm
open are people to talking about these things right off the bat?
That's where I always like, I always think like start big, right? Start with the tour, start with the big questions. And I think, that's okay to ask those types of questions because, they might have a salesperson or they might not, or they may be the salesperson. So it's good to ask. I think there's ways to be respectful and again, genuinely curious, right? And so, I think the hardest ones is to come in and say, well, tell me what'd you put in your pocket last year? I'll go, whoa.
That's probably people's go-to, which is not always the right question.
I know, and I get it, right? Because it's two-way. You want to make sure that this business, you're not walking into something that's way too big and then you feel embarrassed that, oh my gosh, I could never finance that. That's where I kind of look at like employee count is a really good way of like sensing what size of a business it is. Um, and yeah, and that's something too, if in that first call when you're kind of asking questions, if you can even say, hey, if you're comfortable, we can sign an NDA first, but I just want to be respectful of your time. Do you mind sharing like top level what your revenue was last year, just to make sure that, I'm kind of aligned. So again, kind of softer questions of just seeing what, and if they're not comfortable, they won't tell you. That's okay.
What are
So
the top three questions that numbers wise that you want to be asking at this first meeting? And part two, let's say, what are the numbers that you really would like to know that you probably won't get on the first date, so to speak, but these are the really juicy numbers that you should be shooting for?
if they have let you in and shown you a tour and you've signed an NDA, you can certainly talk numbers. And for me, I mean, the number one um, number that they won't have right off the tip of their tongue, but the number one number is SDE, the seller's discretionary earnings. And that number comes from the net income of the business plus anything that the owner has paid themselves within the business. So they may have a salary. That's something that you might have heard them called add backs. You can add that back to the net income, right? Because, it's anything you're just trying to, SDE shows like any money that goes in the business owner's pocket. So that's the most important number. So it could be their net income plus the salary they pay themselves, plus their gym membership that they run through the business. And, like they take their family out to dinner every Sunday, and man, that adds up. So, there's a couple different things in there, but an easy way to ask about that when you're in these initial conversations to get to that really important number is ask what did they pay tax on last year? What number did they pay tax on? Um, and that should give you a good indication of the seller's discretionary earnings for the business.
Okay, cool.
That's the most important number. Revenue, of course, just to kind of give you like a sense of how big and how much business that they're doing. And then probably the third, I think, would be some metric related to the industry. And that's where it's good to do your homework, right? A manufacturer, you're probably going to be really looking at the gross margin and what their COGS are versus a professional services business. You'll probably be more interested in the utilization rate of the team and how much they're spending on paying their employees, right?
And some of these companies do have uh, LinkedIn accounts where they'll have a
Many do.
company page, and I'm guess this is what I would do at least. I would look at the people that are associated with that business, because a lot of people will mark on their LinkedIn that I am this so and so at this company, and you could quickly do a shorthand of calculating the labor cost of the business by looking at the average salary for those roles, as long as they're like generic-ish.
Yeah.
You don't want to be like the CEO of, or the chief officer of happiness at a company with like nobody knows what the
Then that's
average
probably a
revenue.
pretty big business if they have a CHO, Chief Happiness Officer.
Never even
Then
heard of that. But anyway, yeah. But most of the time, you're gonna have customer success manager. You're gonna have sales. This. You're gonna have that. Operations. Most of these things you can copy paste, and Glassdoor or any other resource will tell you like ballpark range in this town. By the way, you want to put town probably, because these roles, uh, the pay varies from state to state
hmm
and town to town. You can kind of do a shorthand of, this is roughly speaking what the labor cost is with the business. And if you're smart, you'll probably do that before you meet, and you can kind of see how close you got.
Right. Because again, and this is where it's like, this is all of the dance and why I say, like, you have to do your homework. If you're coming in and you're talking to someone thinking you're going to take over their business, like, you don't want to go, oh, actually, I can't afford anywhere near how big your business is, right? So, yes, do your homework, do some back of the napkin work on employee count and cost and all of that to see if it's doable. I
So
agree.
you've had this meeting. You've decided that this is definitely a business that you'd want to consider. Say you got the numbers that you were looking for, and now it's time to talk financing. So what is the, we talked about the 101 of financing. What is the next step in our story here as far as financing goes?
So if you're like, okay, this business looks, I continue to be interested, everything I've been hearing, by this point you have requested and received some financials for the business, potentially their tax returns too, right? So, you have a sense of, hey, is the cash flow of this business something that is doable and I can work with? So now you're going to start again with your broker, your banker, your advisory team, start to put together. Um, there might already be an asking price depending on if you're finding it already listed or if you're going straight to a business owner, then you're going to have to likely do a lot of that pricing legwork yourself. And so again, there's kind of the top down and the bottom up, right? Like you've probably heard a lot about multipliers, and again, multipliers of that SDE, that seller's discretionary earning. For a small business, when I say that, like under 500,000, a truly generic multiplier is like between 2 to 3 times what that seller's discretionary earnings number is, and that would be the value of the company. But that 2 to 3 times can be super subjective because it depends on that multiple gets bigger as the cash flow gets bigger. It gets bigger as the profitability of the business in comparison to the revenue gets bigger, the growth rate of the business. We were talking yesterday a little bit about like recurring revenue, all of those, there's value drivers that can make that multiplier go up. And so every industry is a little bit different with their multipliers. But if you go on and kind of Google and you say, what's the multiplier for a landscaping company versus, that has all recurring revenue contracts, right? Versus um, like more of a software company, right? The multipliers are going to be different because they're very different businesses. So that's kind of the bottom up of like, okay, this is the cash flow and this is the multiplier. What's I think more relevant for a business buyer is again what we kind of talked about. Okay, this is the cash flow. how can I pay myself what I'm going to pay myself? How big of a loan? How much cash flow is left over? And what does that back into what size loan is that going to be able to get me? And just make sure, that, and again, usually they kind of start meeting in the middle there, right? Because this is kind of how multipliers are derived, is from how much return on investment there is from a business. So that's what a good SBA banker can kind of help you and make sure that whatever offer you're putting forward, they have kind of given you the thumbs up that, hey, yeah, if they took this offer, we could finance this for you. Because at the end of the day, that's the most important thing, right? You don't want to put an offer in front of the business owner and then your bank go, I can't finance that. You crazy. So
And you have to have an offer accepted before you can get any kind of concrete financing, right? There's no pre-qualification like for a home where it's like I'm thinking about buying a $950,000 house.
oh, yeah, no, you can definitely get that because the bank can write you a letter that says, "Hey, I have spoken with Joe. He's been, with Chase Bank since, the last 10 years, and I have spoken to him. He's that we would support an acquisition up to $3 million with his bank financing. And then, caveat, 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 this is not a guarantee. This is not, but they'll put that together for you.
And that's a good thing to have when you're having this conversation
Yeah,
with the
that can
business
be,
owner of, hey,
yep.
I've already gotten pre-qualified. Okay,
Yep,
that's a
you
tip.
can put it out there. That's a tip. And usually, kind of when you get more down to like the offer, putting together a letter of intent, we put something in there about, hey, I will also show you my proof of funds, is what we call it. So, like I'll show you my down payment sitting in a bank account somewhere. I'm proving to you I really have what I say I'm going to have. Sometimes instead of that proof of funds, someone will take a pre-qualification letter from a bank. That's a little bit lighter, but again, it just kind of shows, hey, I'm doing my homework. I have a banker. We've been talking about this. So, yeah, you can
Cool.
certainly get that.
Okay, so say that you've negotiated with somebody, or I guess maybe it's too fast to move on and say that you've negotiated with somebody. I think negotiation, yeah, negotiation is probably one of the most important parts of these processes. How do you negotiate?
So, um, here's, I think, a great framework. You've met with this owner, you think this looks really great. They've given you their financials. Okay, you've gone and worked with your bank. They've helped you, or your broker. They've kind of helped you put together what could look doable. So the next step I would recommend there, it's called an IOI. It's an indication of interest. It doesn't have to be formal, but I like an indication of interest because all that means is you're presenting that to a business owner and you're expressing interest in their business. This is not legally binding. This is not a legally binding contract in any way. But I always, when I'm talking to people, I like an IOI because I say, hey, we're just going to see if we're in the same ballpark. We're going to see if I'm over there and you're just, so if I go to a business owner and say, Mr. Business owner, this has been wonderful. Thank you so much. I'm thinking I can put together an offer between, you know, 2.5 and 3 million, and it's going to be an SBA loan. And shut your mouth. What do they think? And if they go, well, I'm not taking anything less than 10 million. Okay, so then you guys are probably at an impasse. Perhaps they just have inflated expectations of what their business is. Perhaps, you just don't have enough to finance the business of that size. But I just think that simple conversation, and again, another time I would do it live or on the phone, not an email, nothing. Talk to them live, but have that conversation because that cuts out. But if they go, we be in the ballpark, then you're like, okay, all right, okay, look good. I'll go work on this some more. I'll go put a little bit more meat behind the bone. So that's what I like, so that no one's getting their time wasted. Um, and and then if they do go, okay, then I'd write a little email to them and just say what I just said verbally, just so that you can kind of have it for reference. Hey, we just spoke, and sounds like if I could put together an offer between 2.5 and $3 million, that's SBA financed, you would be open to this. I'll go ahead and start putting together a letter of intent. and have that for you to review in a week or so.
Should you shotgun IOIs with people? Can you?
What do you mean? Like just throw them out there and see?
Yeah, see who
No,
bites.
no.
No, it doesn't work that way.
Because what happens is someone goes, okay, and then
But it's non-committal. It's just flirting.
it is just flirting, but you're definitely not building trust. What if you go, hey, 2.5 to 3 million, and then they go, okay, and then you come in and you're like, oh, actually 1 million. Are they going to love you or hate you? They'll
Okay,
go,
well, you
you
have
just
to like
wasted my time.
calculate the number in advance. You're not just throwing out random
Well,
millions.
you're saying shotgun.
Oh, okay, no, I don't. To be clear, I'm saying like basically to see how many deals you can get across the line. But you still do the due diligence in advance.
Oh, I mean, due diligence comes later. I think, you know, I would just say, you know, put in the, and again, everyone's ethics are different. I'm coming from the wholesome place of put in enough work where your word can be your word as much as you can. But to your point, the whole point of due diligence is for you to trust, like to verify everything they've shown you. And you might come over something that really doesn't make the business worth 2.5 to 3 million, right?
Hmm.
So it might change. But I think, I don't know, when you say shotgun, that to me just seems like, hey, I'll give you 3 million and see if you're gonna turn ahead. And I think you'll just
It
frustrate
doesn't work,
people.
so don't do
No,
it. Okay,
don't
got
do
it.
it. Don't do it.
We're trying to get concrete
Thank you.
answers
Good.
here.
Yeah. Okay, thanks. It doesn't
Okay,
work. Don't do it.
it doesn't work. Don't shotgun IOIs. Okay, cool. So you found one and you have negotiated an offer. There's nothing left to talk about as far as negotiation goes, right? We're
All I will say is a letter of intent is a more formal, non-binding indication of interest. But it's more formal. It's usually a couple pages. It outlines, and it could be as simple as one to a couple of pages, depending on the complexity, but it outlines more of the terms of the offer that you're putting together, um, and has a bit um, more of the offer. So everything, it's kind of like a more detailed handshake agreement of like, hey, if I put together an offer with these things, this is what we're going to be marching towards for the next amount of time. And it tells them how long you're going to have to do due diligence in the company, what you're expecting to have access to for due diligence. And I think this is kind of a key one for buyers. I would suggest putting a provision in there that says, once you sign this LOI and I prove to you that I have the down payment or the funds to make this happen, you will stop marketing your business and you will only work with me until I get to close. So that you know that they're not out there continuing to market the business and that another offer could come in. And you can put in there, if another offer does come in, you will alert me immediately. So you can put that in your LOI, which is nice because you're going to start spending money now on attorneys and due diligence. And so, I think it's only fair to have a business seller stand still and focus on your deal while you're working through the
This is
due
why I was
diligence
so excited
phase.
to have you on the pod because it's things like that that would make a huge difference for people. Imagine somebody's going all in on this particular business, and they start spending money on attorneys and this and that, and they don't put that clause in there, and next thing you know, that money is
Yeah, they're
gone.
like, oh, actually, I got a better offer. Sorry. And you're like, what?
Right.
So
So that protects the buyer from sellers who kind of want to get frisky and they want to explore other offers because
mhm.
I'm sure that's probably a thing, right? They realize, you know what, maybe I do want to sell, and maybe this person that cold called me is not the only option out there for me. So
Correct.
you want to protect
And
yourself.
here's another kind of little nuance in that though, is, if they're working with a broker, we are duty bound by our seller. If an offer does come in, we do have to present it to them, even if they're under like this no shop clause. If they're under exclusivity, we still have to. But if you write in there that you will be notified, I would then go, okay, hey, this came in unsolicited, here it is. But I'd also have to tell the buyer, like, hey, I'm just letting you know this offer came in and you can, so at least you know that that's going on. But if they're not actively marketing it, it should be very low chances that magically some offers just going to show up, right?
Got it. Um, let's see what else. So what is after the IOI phase?
So IOI to LOI, that can it's common for that to take a little bit of negotiating for both sides to feel comfortable with it. And then once that's signed, that moves into the due diligence phase. And there's two big things happening during that as a buyer. You are working like crazy to get your financing together, probably first and most important. And then, well, no, they're both just as important. And then you're doing your due diligence on the business. So, you're verifying the financials, you're just kind of going through all aspects of the business and just making sure that there's nothing there that you see that is a big deal breaker for you.
And that's between IOI and LOI, or is that
Oh, I'm
past?
sorry. IOI to LOI is probably just a couple weeks. Once you have the LOI signed, that means that one of my guys just said this the other day, and I love it. An LOI is like a proposal. You have like said yes and committed to the engagement. And then between the LOI and closing is like you're planning for your wedding, right? So now it's just you and them working together, and you're doing the due diligence and you're working to get your financing in order.
So IOI is not binding. We called it flirting. LOI is binding.
It's and again, every LOI is a little different. In my LOI, all LOIs are not contractually binding. There may be a couple um, terms in there that are binding, like around what we just discussed around like the exclusivity agreement to not shop the deal.
Yeah, you have to
But
tell me if you got another offer.
exactly, that can be binding. But in general, LOIs are not bindings because either party can walk away. If you as a buyer find something that they didn't disclose, you can walk away. There's no contract signed at that point.
Got it. Okay. Well, what if you find something that you don't like in the business during your due diligence process?
Well, I think talk this is the time to build trust and be open and talk to the business seller about it. And I guess there's three paths forward. Talk about it and decide you're going to continue on. Talk about it and decide that whatever you discovered changes the value of the company and you're going to have to change what you're able to pay for it, or whatever you found is just so insurmountable that you no longer are interested in the business and you walk.
Okay. So let's say it goes well and you found a business that you
A
like,
beautiful business, yes.
and there's no crazy hiccups, and you ended up buying it, or maybe you signed an LOI at this point. Now what?
So you're going to go through due diligence. You're going to get your financing going with the bank. The bank, if you're going SBA, is usually the long tent pole in the process. It can take a bit,
How long?
and 60 to 90 days. I've
That's
had
not that
some
long.
up to 120. Well, when you're really excited about a business, it can seem long, right?
Right.
And then meanwhile, you're turning your. This is where the attorneys do get involved, and they take that letter of intent and they start turning it into the official contract, which is called the purchase and sale agreement. So it's an even longer document. And this is again like where they start turning it all into legalese. You start sharing between the parties to review the documents. There's, negotiations on the terms and what people are signing up for. So it's just as you continue towards closing, the contracts become more and more detailed. The non-compete contracts go in there, the employee contracts start to get drawn up. You're starting to think about what vehicle titles need to be transferred. There's just kind of a lot of stuff that you're looking and finding and recording and getting it all together, as you march towards close. And the goal at close is to have all of that real contractual document that has all reps and warranties and schedules and everything in it that says, this business is going to be mine, and buyer and seller, you're both signing it on that day, and they hand you the keys, and you've paid them, and off you guys go. I make it sound so easy.
So easy. What kind of an attorney should people look for? How do you find an attorney to represent you in a deal like this? Is it typically you'll get a referral from a broker anyway, or should you go shopping on your own?
I think, um, you can shop on your own. I just suggest please use an attorney that has transaction experience. And that's what you can ask them. You can call into, you can look them up, right? Look up attorneys. But you can even call into they should have it on their website, right? That they have M&A or transaction experience. A lot of like um, attorneys with that do kind of general business work will do transaction experience, but you just really want an attorney that has done some business sales in their past. You don't want just a general attorney that's never done one. You'll waste time. There's risk for errors. So that's
Okay,
my
cool.
one caveat. And then if I may just say, um, my rule of thumb for attorneys is if you're asking, well, how much is that going to cost? Typically, I say attorneys are about 1% of the gross selling price of the transaction. So
Which is a ton of money.
it can be but on a bigger business. But there's, it's if you're putting your life savings into something, you want to make sure it's papered properly and they've reviewed everything.
And that's not included in the financing, so that's cash out of your pocket. $1 million business,
Well,
you're spending
you
10
can
grand.
talk to your bank about rolling that into your financing. Again, this is where you want to talk with your lender about, what they're doing and how they can structure your loan.
Okay, so this is
Mhm.
like the equivalent of buying a house and then getting a little bit of financing for repairs or improvements.
Yes, yeah. So you want to
Okay,
talk to them because there's working capital, right? There's different things
line of credit,
you
all
want to
that
think
kind of
about.
stuff. Okay,
Hmm.
cool. Didn't know that. How do people feel when they buy their first business or a business? Do they freak out? Is it like an overwhelming amount of responsibility that just like hits them like a tidal wave? What's the post close? What happens post close? Give us the down and dirty, and I want stories too.
Well, you know, it's so different for everyone, but I'll say what's so fun about the work I do and the transaction attorneys I work with, we all say, I was just saying it this morning at this event, like we love what we do because we get to be part of joyous transactions, right? Like we are allowing a business seller to start their next chapter of retirement or pursuing, travel or hobbies that they haven't been able to. So that's super fun. And then you're starting like a whole new business for someone that's buying a business. And they have always big, great, fun ideas of what and how they're going to put their fingerprints on the business. And so that was just really fun. It's really fun, but I think like I don't hear from them the first few weeks because their heads down getting a lot of stuff done, right? There's because getting the keys, right? There's a lot that happen. Okay, bank accounts. We need to make first payroll. We need to make sure our bookkeeper is up. Like there's a lot on the first couple weeks. So I usually don't hear from them until about like 2 months later, and they'll pop their head up and go, "I'm good."
Okay, cool. And that's probably another tip, right? Like any business that you're looking at buying, you should already have ideas ahead of time before you even get to the IOI or the LOI or even hitting them up of, oh, I noticed they're not doing this. They're not running these ads. They're like, you should be looking for the opportunities that these people have missed out on.
Oh, heck
In the
yeah.
same way that a house flipper might look at a home and say, oh, there's
Yeah.
so much to do here.
Right. And that, again, like if you're working with a bank, they're going to ask you for a business plan. And that's probably stuff you'll put in there, right? Of how you're going to make it your own and what ideas you potentially have. So, yeah.
Now, that's actually something we didn't talk about, the business plan. Um, is it a
This is
boilerplate
where,
thing? Do you
well,
have a
this is where
framework?
I say this is kind of like every bank's a little different. So that's where you kind of have to talk to your
Can
banker.
they give you a business plan, somebody else's, and say
Um,
follow this framework?
they can give you, this is a good question for one of my SBA people. I know like good bankers can help coach you and kind of walk through that. I'm
Because they
not
want this deal
guaranteeing
to cross the line too.
they don't want this deal. Heck yeah.
Yeah, maybe you can ask for one of the ones that didn't make it across, but the framework's still good.
Well, and they should be able to help you kind of like take a look at what I've put together. What do you
And
like? What do you
these
don't?
people work for free until the deal crosses the line. So basically, get
Yeah.
as much as you can out of them while
Yeah,
you can.
and don't be shy to meet a handful of bankers, right? Because
It's a
just like
relationship.
we're all humans, it's a relationship. You're going to hit it off with, some more than others, and that's great, you know. So
Awesome. Do you feel like there's anything that we didn't cover that we should have, or questions that I haven't asked that maybe we should address before we wrap this up?
I think the only thing that's maybe just a caveat is I think what we're talking about here aren't like the really small Main Street businesses, but I think everyone can kind of tell like we're talking about kind of more substantial, meatier businesses. And so, but all of these things can apply to the smaller ones. They may not be as difficult or relevant, but hopefully, kind of getting into the nuts and bolts of purchasing a bigger business than just like a single espresso stand kind of helps people think through this. So that was the only thing rolling around in the back of my mind.
Cool. And you have a roadmap that you shared with me. How about we'll have people email you if it's okay to get this roadmap and maybe get some conversation started.
Oh, totally. Yes, we have. It's a buy, sell roadmap that just kind of shows what it looks like from both ends, what it looks like to buy a business and what it looks like to sell a business, and just
And
kind of
it's very
helpful.
detailed and it basically chronicles a lot of what we talked about here. So
Yeah.
if you get this roadmap and listen to the pod, you should be good to go. So what's a good email for people to reach out to you? We can also throw it in the description.
Yeah, they can email me Kara, Kara, at exitequity.com.
All right, and your company website is exitequity.com.
That's right.
Kara, thanks so much for coming on the pod. Looking forward to chatting more offline. And yeah, this is a lot of fun. Thanks for
Awesome. Thank
schooling me.
you. Yeah. Oh my gosh. Thank you for your great ideas. I love it.
All right, thanks.